everybody. So nice to see you again. So this week we're looking at the aspect in the harmonization model that we call ethics. And I was advised by various people to not call this aspect ethics because people tend to have a pretty kind of energetically contracted relationship to ethics. And so it feels worth it to say that I'm standing by that title because I long to rescue and revivify ethics in service of that which is truly worth loving, right? That I believe, and I know this is true for myself, that this aspect of ethics can open up to us as a territory of profound beauty and love for how we can transform our lives to be in accord with that which is worth loving. Right? And so this is how, at a very high level, and you'll hear this in the talk if you listen to it, it's part of this week's module, that I would frame the aspect of ethics. There's two primary questions. First question is, what is worth loving? What is worth loving? And the second question is, how do I bring my life, my behavior, into accord with that which is worth loving? So there's a couple of implications there. One is that we can be confused about what is worth loving, right? We can get waylaid in various ways into believing or serving that which, if we were to reflect honestly, we would realize, in fact, that wasn't what was worth loving. And then the other implication, or one other implication, is that we can have clarity about what is worth loving, and yet our behavior can fail to come into accord with that. And so there's really two movements there in that question, in those questions. And so in terms of the kind of harmonization model, just like we're trying to come into harmony with, or trying to harmonize our energy body, or trying to harmonize our parts so that we can spend more time in self, in the IFS framework. In the ethics aspect, there's a couple ways of framing it, and each of them has a different kind of flavor. One, if you're a kind of a philosophy nerd like me, you could say that we're endeavoring to harmonize the realm of is with the realm of ought. Harmonize is and ought. You could also say that we're attempting to come into harmony with our sense of integrity, our sense of conscience. Or, using the frame of the question I asked previously, we're attempting to harmonize our behavior with our deepest values, with that which is most worth loving. And as we build out all of these aspects, there's a very real way in which completely harmonizing the energy body is to be in self, is to have a harmonized psyche. To have a harmonized psyche and to be in self is to live in accord with that which is most worth loving. Yeah, there's actually a kind of symmetry or isomorphism, some kind of like the truest, deepest expression of harmonization in each of these aspects can't help but be a harmonization of the other aspects. So as we've said in every module, this is, of course, a huge topic. And, this question of how do we live the most deeply meaningful and kind of capital G good life, in a lot of respects, this is the point of the path. This is why we train. This is why we do all of the work we do. At the end, I think, is to live a life and die without regrets. So we can be on our deathbed and say, yeah, that was a good one. I'm really proud of the way I lived. And that, for me, is really what this inquiry of ethics affords, is a sense of like, okay, I'm going to get clear, like, how ought I live so that when I am on my deathbed, I'm like, hell yeah, that was right. I made good choices. I'm proud of that. I'm ready to go now. And so, again, this is a huge exploration. And so we're just going to take a little tiny slice in this class today. And there are kind of two pieces of this big pie of ethics that we're going to be trying to take some nibbles on. The first part is just learning to become sensitive to what we might call the realm of values. So just as we can be impacted by our energy body or impacted by parts and emotions and really not actually know that that's going on, the same is true for values, right? So and the claim that I'm making, that we're making, is that you are always already being motivated by values, but you might not have the skill to perceive that. You may not yet have the skill to perceive that, so we train in order to perceive that aspect of our reality, that aspect of life. That's the first thing we're going to try to open up in this class. The second thing we're going to open up in this class is some offering some guidance on how to reflect on our experience and our values in order to reveal a fuller, deeper connection to those values. So like I said at the beginning, it's often the case, or for many of us in our culture at least, that we can be confused about our values. This is what we called partial values, or what we sometimes call distorted values. And values can become distorted for a number of different reasons, including things like emotional trauma or cultural expectations or family expectations that we sort of taken on as if they were our own. And so then we kind of have these values that we're attempting to live by that actually aren't what is most worth loving. They end up being a very partial representation of that which is true for us. And so we want to learn how to reflect on our experience such that we can sort of escape those partial values and connect more with a deeper sense of what's really beautiful and alive and worth loving. So, as I said, making the claim that you're always already being motivated by values, and we can learn to perceive the way that they guide or sculpt our experience and the way that we pay attention to our lives. And one simple way of pointing to this is whenever we care about something, it's because there's a sense of there being value there for us. There's a sense of there being something that we're longing for, something that we're caring about, wrapped up in that experience. And actually, if you kind of look in this way, you can see that we're always sort of caring about something or other at all times, actually. I remember when I was first really getting into this kind of work, I was walking around Burlington, which is near the Vermont Center, the Monastic Academy. And I was just seeing the way that values were orchestrating all of the humans that I was seeing as I was walking in the downtown. Some people were walking, there's a beautiful lake in Burlington. Some people were walking to the lake. And in a sense, you could say they were walking to the lake, or you could say that the value of beauty, perhaps, was pulling them to the lake. There was a group walking into a restaurant. You could say that they were hungry, maybe that's a kind of value, or they were being pulled by the value of connection, a longing to be in connection with each other. Or for me, I was like walking at the time, I think, to a pizza place. So on the one hand, a kind of partial value would be like, I wanted to eat some pizza. If I were to reflect back and sort of try to open that up, I think I was longing for or looking for a sense of fullness, which, might not have been the best way to achieve that value, eating that pizza. It was delicious, but I don't think it actually gave me what I really deeply wanted. So often our connection with values can be partial and distorted. And so, we'll do an exercise where we'll check in about what our parts are caring about moment to moment. And it may be that it appears as if what I'm really caring about right now is something like fitting in or not making other people mad at me. But if we were to reflect on that and kind of open that up a little bit, we'd see that underneath that or behind that, there's actually this deep longing to be safe and connected, right? Hiding just behind that. But if we relate to life from that love of being safe and connected, a whole different like landscape of possibility and relationship and kind of behavior starts to open up. We're not so constricted in trying to make ourselves be like to fit in, and instead we're like, okay, like so I want to feel connected, or I want to feel safe. Like what's that like to look at the world that way? To connect this a little bit to the previous 2 weeks, just so that you start to build these connections between the aspects, because that's one of the really potent affordances of this model. So you'll notice perhaps that, as it said in the kind of description of this module, that parts tend to be motivated by partial values. They have a kind of narrower and sometimes distorted sense of what's worth caring about, what's worth loving. Whereas self, this kind of more open, disidentified, and yet still caring way of being, tends to be motivated by more abstract, deeper values like connection or compassion, or creativity, right? So self tends to have more access to these values, whereas parts tend to be more caught in partial and distorted values. You'll also notice that the energy body, when you're with a deeper value, tends to be more open and harmonized and flowing. And when you're kind of caught in a partial value or caught in a narrow sense of what's worth loving, the energy body will tend to be closed. Now, what this implies, and this is amazing to me, I've been exploring this for years and it's just still amazing to me, is that the energy body has an implicit moral, ethical sensibility, right? So I'll lead a meditation in a few minutes where we'll kind of look at this a little bit, but just consider the difference in energetic feeling between times when you were generous or even reflecting on generosity versus the energetic feeling of being stingy or guarded. There's a sense of like what is really worth loving. It tends to open us up. It tends to open our energy body. Whereas the ways we get distorted about it tend to constrict us, restrict us. So again, you can go in both directions, right? Is my energy body contracted? Well, then one way of maybe finding more openness is to inquire. Perhaps I'm caught in a narrow sense of what's worth caring about. Is my energy body open? Well, what am I caring about now? Maybe it's something that's a little bit more rich, more deep, more full. So I think I've already gone over the time I wanted to spend talking about this, but there's so much more that we could discuss about this. This is something I'm deeply passionate about. And well, I'll stop there because we're over time. There's more I want to say. For now, though, let's shift into a short guided meditation where we can kind of try to see some of this in our own experience. And then we'll move into some dyad work.